Hey guys, welcome back to another Nichal Tube biology tutorial. So today we're gonna be looking at part 2 of the cells lesson, biology lesson for grades 7 through 9. And in part 2 we're gonna be looking at the functions of cell organelles. So without any further ado, let's get started. Now before we start, don't forget to subscribe, like this video, and share this with everyone you know. Our goal is to hit 100 subscribers by the end of 2020, and I definitely think that we can make this possible. So we're going to start off with a quick recap, but I highly suggest that you watch part 1 to get a better understanding of what I'll be talking about in this video. Right now I'm just giving a quick recap of what happened in lesson 1 and part 1, but I'll link it in the description. Watch it and then come back to this video. So I'll give you a recap anyways for those of you who already watched the first video, and just get an understanding of what happened. Just recapitulate what happened in your mind. So what is a cell? The cell was discovered by Robert Hooke in the year 1665. He was observing a dead slice of cork. The functions of cells: they're structural and functional units of life because they form the structure of a human body and they carry out several important functions. This is the hierarchy of the human body. It all starts off with a cell, several cells working together with on the same function, and they're similar in structure. They form a tissue. Several tissues working together form an organ, and then several organs working together create an organ system, and then our body consists of several different organ systems properly functioning, and that allows us to remain as healthy human beings. So there's two main types of cells that we're going to be looking at: prokaryotic cells and eukaryotic cells. So prokaryotic cells, they're called prokaryotic because they have a primitive nucleus. They don't even have no true nucleus. It's just a vast area called a nucleoid. It doesn't have a true membrane-bound organelles, and typically it's only seen in unicellular organisms. And the DNA formation, as you can see here, you'll see it very differently in the eukaryotic cell in the next slide. But prokaryotic cells have a circular DNA formation, and this type of cells can be seen in blue-green algae, bacteria, and several other unicellular organisms such as Chlamydomonas, Paramecium, and all sorts of other unicellular organisms, meaning that they only have one cell. So yeah, this is prokaryotic cells. Now eukaryotic cells, on the other hand, you can already see a major difference in the shape. So we're looking at a well-supported, supported by a membrane. It's a well-defined nucleus. It's typically only seen in unicellular organisms. Cell division occurs through mitosis and meiosis, and the cell division of prokaryotic cells is very different compared to eukaryotic cells, and we'll be looking at that in part 3. And they have membrane-bound organelles, and yeah, compared to the diagrams of the prokaryotic versus the eukaryotic, you can see a major difference in the shape, the content inside, and just how well structurally sound the eukaryotic cell is. And this type of cell is seen in plants, animals, fungi, and practically any multicellular organism across our globe. And just to recap, multicellular organisms have more than one cell, 2 or more cells. So within eukaryotic cells, there's really 2 types: plant cells and animal cells, and these are the main things that we'll be focusing on for this series of videos. So let's look at the differences. Quick recap of plant cells versus animal cells. So remember, an organelle, which is very important for this video, lesson 2, an organelle is a subunit within a cell that carries out several important functions. Examples: cell membrane, nucleus, mitochondria, chloroplasts. These are all organelles. They're like the organs of a cell. Our human body has organs, and a small cell inside, also has organs. So plant cells have a cell wall, which is not seen in animal cells, which is why they have a rectangular shape. Some of the organelles that differ between plant cells and animal cells is that plant cells have plastids, leucoplasts, and chromoplasts, and these play an important role in storage as well as photosynthesis. And plant cells have a very large central vacuole, and it takes up nearly 50 to 90% of the cell, and we'll be looking into all of this in this video of lesson 2 right now. Just get an understanding of the differences. And the nucleus in a plant cell is pushed towards the edge of the cell or the periphery because of the large size of the vacuole. Now, animal cells, we have lysosomes, centrosomes, centrioles. These are the three organelles which are found in animal cells but not found in plant cells, and they have an irregular shape compared to the boxy shape of the plant cells. So now let's get into lesson 2. Just a quick we're looking back at what an organelle is. You all know, like, in organs of the human body, cells have their own organs called organelles. So in any cell, whether it be a plant cell, an animal cell, any cell has these three organelles. It's a cytoplasm, a nucleus, and a cell membrane. So let's look at the cell membrane first. It is the outermost covering of every single cell, and it forms a semi-permeable membrane, meaning that it can only permeate certain substances in and out. It can only permit a few substances in, and it closely monitors what's going in and out of the cell to prevent any foreign substances or harmful substances from entering our body. And the cell membrane is composed of lipids and proteins, which are produced by the endoplasmic reticulum. We'll get into that later. And it's highly flexible. We can see let's take an example of a unicellular organism called the amoeba. I'm sure you all know what the amoeba is. And so you all know that the amoeba has a cell membrane, and because this cell membrane is so flexible, it can engulf its food through a process called endocytosis. Remember that endocytosis is the process in which jelly-like organisms like amoeba can just engulf their food. And that's only due to the fact that the cell membrane of amoeba is so flexible. So, cell wall. In plants, along with the cell membrane, they also have a cell wall. It's composed of cellulose, and its location is outside of the cell membrane. So, plant cells, they have a cell membrane covering like any cell, and they also have an extra layer called the cell wall. And the cell wall, really, it provides structural strength, which is why these plants have such a boxy shape. This is all thanks to the cell wall. And the cell wall also adds turgidity to the plant, which prevents it from being damaged easily. So the nucleus, also known as the heart of the cell, it's covered by a nuclear membrane, and on top of that membrane there are small pores known as nuclear pores, and these pores permit substances in and out. And inside the nucleus there's actually a nucleolus, which is present inside the nucleus, and it takes up about 25% of the volume inside the nucleus. And the nucleolus plays an important role in the formation of RNA, ribonucleic acid. And then the nucleus, around the nucleolus, there's chromatin, which is a strand-like material, a DNA material. And then during cell division, this chromatin strand-like material divides into chromosomes, individual chromosomes. So we can say that the nucleus contains chromatin, which divides into chromosomes. So, next, cytoplasm. It's a jelly-like substance inside every cell. It's enclosed within the cell membrane, and its main function is to hold organelles in place, and it also contains like cellular waste and stuff like that. So, locating the organelles, we can see the cytoplasmic membrane. We have the nucleus and the cytoplasm. So the cell membrane has several names. It can be called a cytoplasmic membrane, like in this diagram, a plasma membrane, or a cell membrane. And don't be confused by these names, because you know that all of these are referring to the overall cell membrane, which we talked about. It's the outermost layer of a cell, and it only permits certain substances in and out. So we also located the nucleus and the cytoplasm. So yay, hooray, we're done, and we know where these three main organelles are. So thumbs up, kudos to that. Let's move on. So we covered cytoplasm, we covered the nucleus, and we covered the cell membrane. Now let's talk about organelles that are not present in every cell and could differ between different types of cells. And we're going to start off with mitochondria. The mitochondria is also known as the powerhouse of the cell, and this is because it generates adenosine triphosphate, ATP, which is also known as the energy currency of the cell. So the cell is powered by this adenosine triphosphate, and it's generated by the mitochondria, which is why it's known as the powerhouse of the cell. And some organelles, we'll look into a few, mainly two organelles, excluding the nucleus, have a double membrane, and they have their own DNA and ribosomes. And these are strange organelles. Alright guys, there's only 2 of them. We'll look at the next one in a couple of minutes. But yes, the mitochondria, if you think of mitochondria, you have to think of energy, power. It's known as the powerhouse of the cell because it generates ATP, adenosine triphosphate. So next organelle, endoplasmic reticulum. The location of this is it's continuous with the nucleus, and it acts as a transport of materials, a channel of transport between cells and just within the cell itself, intercellular transport, and sometimes intracellular transport as well. So there's 2 main types, smooth endoplasmic reticulum and rough endoplasmic reticulum. So rough endoplasmic reticulum, also known as RER. The reason why they call it rough is because on the surface it has ribosomes attached to it, which make it have this rough texture to it. And as you all know, ribosomes play an important role in synthesis of protein. And yes, so the endoplasmic reticulum generates protein and transports it. So yes, it generates proteins, produces protein thanks to the ribosomes attached to the surface, and then it transports these proteins to another location. And it also plays an important role in membrane biogenesis. And like I mentioned in a couple of slides, the cell membrane is made up of lipids and proteins. And so the proteins, they're taken care of by the rough endoplasmic reticulum. So membrane biogenesis, we'll look into another, the smooth endoplasmic reticulum. They play an important role in lipid synthesis. So yes, so lipids are taken care of by the smooth endoplasmic reticulum, and proteins are taken care of by the rough endoplasmic reticulum. So that's what the cell membrane is composed of, lipids and proteins, and both of these are produced by the SER and the RER respectively. So another important role that the smooth endoplasmic reticulum plays in the cell would be detoxifying poisons and drugs. Alright? So when you think of rough endoplasmic reticulum, you know that they have ribosomes. Ribosomes means protein synthesis. And then smooth endoplasmic reticulum, they synthesize lipids and they detoxify poisons and drugs, which could be in the body, and we don't want those harmful substances in our body, but fortunately smooth endoplasmic reticulum takes care of that. Okay, now let's look into the Golgi apparatus. So this is another one of those organelles that have so many different names. It can be called a Golgi apparatus, a Golgi body, a Golgi complex. In this diagram it just says Golgi, but regardless of all these names, remember, if it says Golgi, then you know what you're talking about. So it's the packaging center of the cells. The structure, it almost looks like a flattened stack of pancakes almost. You can look at it in the diagram here. It's pointing to the Golgi apparatus. And you can see it looks like several pancakes in different sizes stacked up together. So it receives lipids and proteins from the ER and transports them to various different parts of the cell. So, like I mentioned earlier, guys, the ER synthesizes lipids and proteins and then transports it to this location. And the location I was talking about is the Golgi apparatus. And the Golgi apparatus is a special function. It can turn simple sugars into complex sugars, and when it's transporting something, it can add a little something, like it can add some carbohydrates or some additional thing to the proteins and lipids and make them more functional and useful before it transports them to some other area of the cell. So this organelle was first discovered by Camillo Golgi. So remember that, keep that in mind. So what does the Golgi apparatus do? It's the packaging center of the cell. So if we have kind of a pattern here that each organelle kind of has its own name and it plays a role. Like as you guys know, the mitochondria is the powerhouse. The endoplasmic reticulum, or the ER, it's like a transport channel, and this Golgi apparatus is the packaging center. So vacuole in animals, and then there's another vacuole for plants, and they just kind of vary. So you can see in the diagram the vacuole is a lot smaller, and you'll see in the plant cell that it's a lot bigger than compared to the vacuoles in animal cells, and it just simply acts as a storage unit of waste water and excessive material. It's just a storage unit, nothing Nothing to it, really. Now, the vacuole in plants, you can see it's a lot bigger. It takes up about 50 to 90% of the cell volume. And it's so big that it can push the nucleus towards the edge of the cell. It has its own membrane called the tonoplasts, and it adds turgidity to the plant and adds structural support. So you may be wondering, a lot of different organelles play such an important role in adding structural support to the plant, and why is that? Well, the thing is, plants are always in the same position. They're stationary, and in order to stand up like that for such a long period of time, for eternity basically, in order to remain like that, they have to have a supportive tissue. And that's why in plants there's actually a lot more dead cells rather than in animals, who are always in motion looking for shelter, food, and other resources, making the tissues and the cells in the animals are a lot more living tissue compared to the dead cells in plant tissue, because they just need support, guys, really. Lysosomes, these are one of the organelles that are only found in animals. They contain hydrolytic enzymes, and basically the function of these enzymes, it can digest foreign material and other dead organelles. These enzymes have the high intense capacity to completely digest and swallow them whole and get rid of them, basically. And they're also known as suicide bags of the cell. So why are they called suicide bags? Well, if the cell is ever damaged, then the hydrolytic enzymes of these lysosomes, they have the ability to digest the whole cell, the dead cell. And so they're practically killing themselves, which is why they're known as suicide bags. So plastids, these are only found in plant cells. The two main types are chromoplasts and leucoplasts. And although the leucoplasts weren't included in this model, I'll try to give you a good explanation. Basically, they act as another storage unit for starch and protein. And leuco means white, so they're colorless compared to chromoplasts, which have a very vivid color, actually. And within chromoplasts, the main type is chloroplasts, and they play an important role in photosynthesis for the plant, which is very important. It's the source of food and energy. And the leucoplasts, as I mentioned, they act as another storage unit for starch and protein. So centrosomes, these are one of the organelles that are only found in animal cells. You can see here that it's composed of two centrioles. So two centrioles make up a centrosome. And ideally, a centriole contains these microtubule filaments. Alright, these filaments, and they compose a centriole, and then two of these centrioles compose a centrosome. And during cell division, each centriole goes to a separate side of the cell, and they initiate cell division. So yes, they play an important role in the initiation of cell division. So if you ever get a question saying, what is the organelle that initiates or sparks or plays an important role during cell division, you automatically know it's a centrosome. So let's do some quick quiz time. Which organelle is known as the suicide bags of the cell, and why is it called this? So as I mentioned earlier, the lysosomes are known as suicide bags of the cell, and the reason being is that if the cell is ever damaged, the lysosomes could burst and the hydrolytic enzymes could just digest the cell whole. So next question. What chemical substance does the mitochondria release? This energy, what is it called? And I'll give you a few seconds to think. Alright, you guys should know it's called adenosine triphosphate ATP. It's the energy currency of the cell, which is why the mitochondria is known as the powerhouse of the cell. Next question. Which organelles have their own ribosomes and genetic material? Alright, let's go back to plastids real quick. Like I mentioned earlier, there are two main organelles, putting the nucleus aside, that have a double membrane. And they have their own they have their own ribosomes and genetic material. And those are plastids and mitochondria. So I kind of gave you the answer for that question. Yes. The organelles that have their own ribosomes and genetic material are the mitochondria and plastids. They're pretty strange organelles. They have their own ribosomes, so they can synthesize their own protein, and they also have DNA. So they have their own genetic material and their own genetic identity. So guys, I didn't mention ribosomes as its own slide, but ribosomes means protein. That's really all you need to know. Ribosomes synthesize protein. They're found in the nucleus, they're found in the rough endoplasmic reticulum, they're found in mitochondria, they're found in plastids, and they're just found all across the cell. So, what happens to chromatin during cell division? I'll give you a few seconds to think. Alright, so during cell division, the chromatin is separated. Remember, chromatin is like a strand-like material, and during cell division, it's separated into chromosomes. And fifth question, which organelle, this is pretty easy guys, which organelle is known as the heart of the cell? I'll give you a few seconds to think. Alright, pretty easy, the nucleus is known as the heart of the cell. Now this one is a bonus question. What would happen to the cell if there was no Golgi body? I want you guys to comment your answer down below, and people that get this answer right, they will get a shout out in the next video. So yes, comment your answers down below. Right answers get a shout out in the next video. So, in part 3, this is what we're going to be talking about. I'm just giving you guys a quick foreshadow of what's going to happen in part 3. So, we're going to be talking about cell division, and there's two types of cell division. Mitosis versus meiosis. We're going to be talking about how each of those processes works, and the various differences between those processes. And we're also going to be talking about movement across the cell membrane, so diffusion and osmosis, and also the effects of the cell during various different types of osmosis. So what happens to the cell when it's placed in a hypotonic solution? What happens to the cell when it's placed in a hypertonic solution, isotonic solution? And you may not know these, don't worry guys. I'll be completely discussing all of these terms in the upcoming video. And we're just going to be ending off with a quick recap and quiz. So that's what part 3 is going to look like. Stay tuned for part 3. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on post notifications so you're immediately notified when I upload part 3. And yeah, Niche Tube educational tutorials for all grades. During this unprecedented crisis, I just want to show you guys that learning doesn't stop. Whether we're in a pandemic, it really doesn't matter. Learning has to continue, and it's an endless journey that will forever continue. So thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, like this video, and share this with everyone you know. And yeah, this has been Niche Tube, and until the next video, peace.